It was early October of 2018 when I decided to take a solo camping trip into the Black Hills of South Dakota. I was 32 back then and had been working in a machine shop for the past 10 years. I needed a break. I was starting to feel the walls closing in at work and home. The noise, the constant pressure, the routine of it all. I just needed silence, something away from it. I figured a few days by myself, out in nature, no phone, no people, just me in the woods. That might clear my head. I didn't have a ton of experience camping alone, but I'd gone out enough times with friends and my brother when we were younger to feel like I could handle myself. I'd bought a decent tent the year before, a heavy-duty one meant for rain and wind. I packed my gear carefully. Small propane stove, sleeping bag rated for cold, tarp, rope, matches, a folding saw, some freeze-dried meals, water tablets, a strong flashlight, and a backup headlamp. I brought extra batteries and a knife too. I kept everything as tight and simple as possible. No extra gadgets. I also had a map of the area, an actual paper map, and I marked a place about 2 miles off a Forest Service road I found on Google Earth a few days before. It was a spot next to a shallow creek in a small clearing between thick pine. I left my old Dodge Ram parked along the service road, well off the path but not hidden. If something happened, I wanted it to be seen. I hiked in with a heavy pack, taking my time. It took me a little over an hour and a half to reach the clearing. The air smelled sharp, almost wet already, like rain was hanging up high and waiting. Leaves had started to turn, mostly gold and light orange in the lower brush. The trees in that part of the hills grow tight together. Thick trunks, deep green needles. It feels like the kind of place sound doesn't travel far. I barely saw a squirrel or a bird the entire walk-in. I set up camp right before it got dark. The sun drops fast out there in the fall. I cleared some rocks, staked my tent close to a big pine for wind cover, and laid my tarp under everything to keep the ground moisture out. I boiled water for one of those mountain house meals and ate while sitting on a log. I remember how still everything felt. I could hear the small creek moving slowly just 20 feet from me. But other than that, it was dead quiet. No bugs, no wind, just the occasional drop of a pine cone somewhere deep in the trees. The rain started sometime after midnight. First, it was light, just a soft tapping on the nylon of the tent, almost calming. I woke up slowly to it. I didn't open my eyes right away. I remember lying there in my sleeping bag, half asleep, counting the drops, just kind of drifting. But then I noticed how cold it had gotten, much colder than I expected. I had my bag zipped all the way up, but I could still feel the chill creeping in. I reached up and checked around the top of the tent. Everything was dry. The rain got a little harder. The steady rhythm of it started to echo louder, almost like static. I was still tired, so I tried to go back to sleep. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard something strange. It was a crunch, not a branch snapping, but a slow, soft crunch, like someone stepping lightly on wet needles. I froze. My head was just inches from the tent wall. I held my breath. At first I thought maybe it was an animal, maybe a deer or something moving around. But the sound wasn't random. Came in small, careful steps. Not four-legged, not bounding or snuffling. Just slow, one-at-a-time steps. Heavy ones. Someone was walking near my tent. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The steps were close, circling. They sounded like they came from the edge of the clearing. The rain was making it hard to hear clearly, but there was no mistaking it. It wasn't an animal. Someone was out there. I stayed frozen for what felt like 10 minutes. The footsteps stopped. I didn't hear anything after that. No zipper sound, no voice, just the steady rain, the wet air, and the rush of blood in my ears. Eventually, I sat up very slowly, slipped the knife from the inside pocket of my bag, and held it under the sleeping bag. I didn't unzip the tent. I didn't even reach for the flashlight. I just sat there in the pitch dark, listening, waiting for anything. Nothing. I stayed like that until morning. The rain never stopped. The first light, I stepped outside. The trees were slick with water, the pine needles dark and shiny. The firewood I stacked was soaked through. Everything smelled like damp bark and cold air. I walked around the perimeter of my camp, checking the ground. There were no clear footprints, but the pine floor was soft. It didn't hold impressions well. Still, near the north side of the clearing, I found a disturbed patch of needles. A small spot, maybe the size of a dinner plate, looked slightly sunken, like someone had stood there. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe I imagined it. But something in my gut was saying otherwise. It wasn't a dream. I knew what I heard. Those steps didn't come from a deer or a bear. They were slow, careful, human. I told myself I'd stay one more night. Maybe I was just tired and hearing things. I spent the day trying to stay busy. I gathered dry wood from under thick brush and cut it into usable pieces. I started a small fire with the driest stuff I could find, mostly just to keep myself distracted. I boiled water for coffee. I walked down the creek and filled my filter bottle. By late afternoon, the clouds rolled in heavier than the day before. It got darker way earlier than it should have. I checked my watch. It was barely 5:30 and it looked like twilight. The wind picked up. The tops of the trees swayed hard, the sound like distant ocean waves. I sat near the fire until the rain came back. It was harder this time, a steady pour that hit the tarp and tent like pebbles. I got into the tent around 7 p.m. I wasn't tired yet, but the rain was too heavy to do anything else. I double-checked the tent zippers, made sure my gear was sealed up, and lay back with my headlamp on. I read the map again even though I didn't need to. I just wanted to look at something. The rain got heavier. Then it thundered. A slow roll, low and far off. The lightning flashed pale blue through the fabric. I counted 5 seconds. Then the thunder came again. Closer. The rain came in sheets. It was loud. The kind of loud that gets in your ears and chest. And then, through all of it, I heard something else. Another crunch. Another step. At first I thought it was just the rain playing tricks on me. But then came another. And another. Closer this time. Definitely steps. I sat up quickly, heart racing. I reached for my flashlight and shut off the headlamp. I sat still, knife in hand, listening hard. The steps stopped. The only sound was rain and the thunder in the distance. Then something brushed the side of the tent. It wasn't hard. It was soft, like someone ran their fingers lightly across the side wall. I jumped back and held my breath. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't see a thing. Just pitch black. Another touch. Near the back this time. Then the sound of soft breathing, not mine. I felt the tent floor move slightly. Just the faintest shift, like pressure against the fabric. I was paralyzed. I couldn't even bring myself to speak or yell or move. I didn't want to unzip the tent. I didn't want to shine my light. I waited for what felt like an hour. Then, finally, silence again. No more steps. No more breathing. Just rain. I stayed awake the entire night, knife in hand, waiting for it to come back. It never did. By morning, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The sky was a dull gray. I got out of the tent, soaked and stiff. I looked around the entire camp. There were marks this time, clear ones. Near the back of the tent, in the soft mud, I saw a footprint. A real footprint. Human.
Bare.
Toes and all. It wasn't big, maybe a size 10, but it was real. I packed everything in under 20 minutes. Didn't bother cleaning my cookware or drying anything out. I just stuffed it all in the pack and headed straight for the road. The walk back felt longer than the way in. Every crack in the woods, every gust of wind, made me jump. I kept checking behind me. My heart didn't slow down until I saw my truck. I drove straight out of the hills and didn't stop until I reached Rapid City. I checked into a cheap motel off the highway and stayed in the room for hours, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my muddy pack. I never called anyone. I didn't report it. What would I say? That someone was walking barefoot out in the hills during a storm and watched me sleep? No one would believe it. I wasn't even sure I believed it, but I still have the knife I used. I keep it near my bed even now, and I haven't gone camping alone since. My name is Dylan. This happened to me in October of 2019. I was 27 at the time, and I had been working in a warehouse job in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I didn't have a lot going on in my life back then. No wife, no kids, not many friends outside of work. I'd gotten into solo camping the year before, mostly because I needed a break from the noise of everything and everyone around me. Something about sleeping out in the middle of nowhere made me feel calmer, more in control. Maybe I liked the feeling that nobody knew where I was. I know that probably sounds strange, but that's just how I was back then. That October, I decided to take a few days off work and drive west. I'd been looking at maps and found a remote canyon area in New Mexico, just north of the Gila National Forest. There was a stretch of land out there that wasn't on any major trail, no official campgrounds, just old paths and dry creeks. I found it on a hiking forum. Some guy posted about hiking the ridges and said he didn't see a single person for 3 days. That sounded perfect to me. I packed light but smart. Tent, sleeping bag, layers for the cold nights, plenty of water, dehydrated meals, flashlight, GPS, and a .22 revolver I kept for snakes or whatever else. I wasn't paranoid, but I liked having it close. I filled the tank of my old 4Runner and hit the road. It was about a 10-hour drive from Tulsa. I stopped for gas a few times, grabbed a breakfast burrito at a gas station outside Santa Rosa, and made my way into the high desert. By late afternoon, I was on a rough dirt road about 15 miles from the main highway. The sun was going down, and the land around me looked like something out of a movie: red dirt, scattered brush, small dry trees, and a wide open sky. I saw some distant ridges and a few deep cuts in the earth, canyons or old riverbeds. That was where I was headed. I parked at the base of one of the ridges. It wasn't marked, but the GPS said I was near where the old trail should be. There was no cell signal. That didn't bother me. I set up camp not too far from the car that first night. I figured I'd hike in deeper the next morning. That first night was quiet, cold but peaceful, stars like I hadn't seen in years. I sat by the little fire I built, ate a pouch of beef stew, and crawled into my sleeping bag just after 9. I remember how still it was. Not even the wind was moving. The next morning, I packed up and headed west along a narrow game trail. I didn't see any signs of recent hikers, just old boot prints that looked weeks or months old, maybe older. The trail hugged the side of the ridge and dipped down into a dry wash. I followed that for maybe 5 miles before I stopped. Around noon, I came across an area where the rocks formed a kind of natural half-circle, almost like a shallow bowl with some scrub and juniper trees scattered inside. It looked like a good place to camp, hidden and flat with a few rock outcrops that gave it a bit of protection from the wind. I set up my tent and spent the rest of the day walking the ridge lines. The sun was hot, but the wind cooled me off. I found an old rusted canteen half buried in the dirt, probably decades old. There was no sign of other campers. I didn't hear any planes or cars, no other hikers, no animals, nothing. It was strange how empty it all felt. I liked that. That night, I built a small fire with the dry brush and deadwood I'd gathered. I sat there watching the flames dance, wrapped up in my jacket, sipping from a plastic bottle of whiskey I brought. I didn't drink much, just enough to warm up my chest. I was starting to doze off in my camp chair when I heard something move. It was soft, just the sound of something brushing against dry branches. My eyes snapped open. I turned off my headlamp and listened. Nothing. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again, closer this time, like something moving just beyond the firelight. I stood up slowly and stepped back toward the tent where I kept my revolver. I didn't draw it. Not yet. I waited. The fire crackled. Then nothing. Dead quiet. I called out. Not with words, just a sharp whistle. Still nothing. I stayed up another hour. Never saw anything. Eventually, I let the fire burn down and went into the tent. I zipped everything up tight. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up thinking I heard footsteps, twigs snapping. But when I'd sit up and listen, there was nothing. The next day, I didn't go far, just explored around camp. Found some strange bones near one of the boulders. They were clean, sun-bleached, small, maybe a rabbit or a coyote, but they were stacked, like someone had placed them in a little pile. That felt off. Animals don't do that. That afternoon, I climbed a high point overlooking the canyon. The view was wide open. You could see miles in every direction. I scanned the area with my binoculars. Nothing. No movement, no smoke, no people. But I had this feeling, hard to explain, like I wasn't alone. Not watched exactly, but like someone had been there recently. A weird energy in the air. Even the wind felt wrong. Sharp and fast, then dead still. Like something was holding its breath. That night is when it got worse. It started around 11. I was inside the tent, half asleep, when I heard footsteps. Not animal steps, these were human. Crunching dry dirt, slow and deliberate. They circled the tent once. Then again. I froze. I had the revolver in my hand. My heart was slamming against my chest. Then I heard breathing. Just outside, like someone standing over the tent. I stayed dead still, didn't even blink. I thought maybe I was dreaming, but I wasn't. I was wide awake, and someone was right outside the thin nylon wall. Then the breathing stopped, and I heard my name, not whispered, not shouted, just said, in my voice. It was like someone had recorded me saying my name and was playing it back. Same tone, same exact pitch. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just gripped the gun so tight my hand went numb. After maybe a minute, the sound stopped. The footsteps moved away, slow at first, then faster. Then they were gone. I stayed in the tent until the sun came up. I packed everything the next morning. Didn't even eat. I threw my gear together, stuffed the tent half folded into my pack, and started hiking fast back the way I came. I wasn't thinking clearly, just moving. I don't know if it was fear or instinct or both, but I couldn't be there another second. Around noon, I stopped to catch my breath and drink water. That's when I noticed prints. Bootprints. But they weren't mine. They were heavier, deeper, wider stride. Someone had followed me. They came from the direction of the canyon and ran parallel to mine for almost a mile. They just stopped at a rock outcrop. No sign of where they went after that. By evening, I was back at the Forerunner. Nothing looked touched. I got inside, locked the doors, and drove. Didn't stop until I hit the highway. I got a cheap motel in a small town near Silver City. I didn't sleep much there either. Back in Tulsa, I tried to forget about it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post anything online. I just went back to work like nothing happened. But I kept thinking about it, especially the voice, how it sounded exactly like me. Not similar. Exactly. A few months later, I saw a post online. Some guy had camped near the same area. He said someone or something had followed him at night. Said he heard someone mimic his dog's bark right outside his tent. Even though his dog had died a year earlier, he left the next morning. The post got deleted a few hours later. I don't know what I saw. I don't know who was out there. Maybe it was just some lunatic playing tricks. Maybe I imagined it all. But I've never gone camping alone again. I still think about that voice sometimes. The way it said my name in the exact way I would. Like it wasn't repeating it. Like it was practicing. I had just turned 30 that spring, and I felt like I was wasting away behind a desk. I was living in a small apartment in Boise, Idaho, working remote tech support. My job paid okay, but the days all blended into each other. Wake up, coffee, screen, lunch, screen, sleep, repeat. I needed a break. Something real, something far from noise and traffic and lights. So when the weather warmed up in early June of 2019, I packed my gear and headed north to an area I'd read about called Barehead Ridge, somewhere in the Payette National Forest. It wasn't a tourist spot. There weren't any lodges or campsites with running water. Just open space, dense woods, narrow dirt roads, and nothing but pines, dirt, and silence. I told my buddy Steve where I was going, just in case. Gave him coordinates and told him I'd be back in 4 days. I had my tent, sleeping bag, bear spray, a hatchet, a small propane stove, food, a pistol I barely ever used, and enough water for the whole trip. I planned to hike in about 5 miles from the nearest Forest Service road and make camp near a stream I saw on the map. No cell service, just the sound of the wind in the trees. The drive took about 4 hours, the last 30 miles on a bumpy dirt road full of deep ruts and potholes. I parked my truck in a small pull-off, locked it up, slung on my pack, and started walking. The trail was overgrown and hard to follow, but I didn't care. I loved the quiet. Every now and then I'd stop and just listen. No engines, no people, no hum of electronics. Just birds, leaves rustling, and my own breathing. About 2 hours in, I reached the stream I was aiming for. It was clearer than I expected, moving quick but not too loud. Good place to refill water and rinse off. I pitched my tent a bit uphill, maybe 50 yards from the water, under a few thick pines. The trees were tight enough to give shade, but spaced enough to let me see a good distance all around. I cleared away sticks and rocks, set up my small fire ring, cooked some freeze-dried chili, and sat there in silence for a long time. That first night went smooth. I heard coyotes far off after midnight, and some animal, probably a deer, walked near the stream. I had a small flashlight, but I didn't use it much. I was trying to train myself to let the dark be dark. The second day, I hiked out in a big loop with just a light pack. Nothing dramatic, just exploring. I crossed an old logging road that didn't seem like it had been used in years. Found a weird pile of branches that looked stacked on purpose, but figured maybe it was from an old trail crew or something. Saw a few elk. When I got back to camp, everything was just how I left it. I made a small fire and watched the sky change color until it went pitch black. That second night is when things started to feel off. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up. I don't know what woke me. Maybe a sound, maybe a feeling, but I sat up in my sleeping bag, wide awake. The kind of awake where your chest is tight and you don't even know why. I stayed still for a long time, listening. At first, I didn't hear anything, just that distant rushing of the stream. Then I heard a single crack, like a stick snapping somewhere to my left. Not close, maybe 50 feet away. Then silence again. Crack. Same sound, same direction. But it wasn't rhythmic. It wasn't like an animal walking. It was slow, careful. One step, then nothing. One step, then nothing. Like someone trying to stay quiet, but not quite quiet enough. I reached for my flashlight, but didn't turn it on. I just held it in one hand and slowly unzipped the side of the tent. I peeked out through the mesh. Pitch black. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was out there, and it wasn't leaving. For 10 minutes, nothing. Just that tight silence that builds up so strong it feels like it's pressing against your ears. Then I heard another step, but this time it was behind the tent. I froze. My hands were sweating. I reached for the pistol and sat there with it in my lap, listening as hard as I ever had in my life. No more steps, no more noise. Eventually, the sky started to lighten up with early dawn. When it was bright enough to see, I finally stepped out. There were no tracks. The pine needles and leaves were dry, and nothing looked disturbed. I walked in a big circle around the camp, checking every tree, every shadow, every rise. Nothing. I told myself it was a deer or an elk, that it wasn't anything weird, but I didn't really believe that. That third day, I stayed close to camp. I didn't hike out. I sharpened my hatchet on a rock, collected more firewood than I needed, double-checked my gear. I kept the pistol on my belt. I felt paranoid, but it wasn't the usual jumpy kind. It was deeper than that, like I was being watched and the watcher didn't care if I knew. The third night was worse. I didn't sleep at all. I just laid there waiting. I heard the same noises again, first to the left, then behind. Then it circled. I swear to God, whatever it was circled my tent all night. I stayed completely still, holding the pistol, sweating, every muscle locked. At one point I heard breathing. Not mine, someone else's. Just outside the tent. Not fast, not heavy. Just calm, like they had all the time in the world. But I didn't see anything when the sun came up. Again, no tracks. No broken branches. I was starting to question everything. I should have packed up and left right then, but I didn't. I told myself it was just fear, that I'd come all the way out here for solitude, and now I was scared of some branches snapping in the dark. I stayed, but I moved my tent uphill about 100 yards, just for a change of scenery. It was a bad choice. That final night was the worst. I was dozing off, finally exhausted, when I heard something way off down the hill. At first I thought it was wind. Then I realized it was footsteps. More than one set. They were coming from where my old camp was, and they were getting louder. I sat up fast and turned off my small lantern. I held the pistol and waited, heart pounding. Then I saw them. Flashlights. 3 of them. Low to the ground, moving slow. Not forest rangers, not hikers. They didn't call out, didn't wear high-vis clothes. Just slow-moving lights, weaving through the trees. Coming up the hill. They weren't lost. I dropped to my belly and crawled out the back of the tent. I moved into the trees, staying low, circling wide. I left everything, tent, food, gear. I didn't care. I just wanted to be gone. I moved through the trees for over an hour, backtracking, cutting across deadfall, trying not to leave a trail. Eventually, I found the old logging road again. I followed it east until I hit the main forest road and walked the rest of the way to my truck in the dark. When I reached the truck, I stood there for 5 minutes before unlocking it. I watched the woods behind me the whole time. Nothing moved, but I still felt like eyes were on me. I drove the whole way back to Boise without stopping. Left the forest behind without looking back. I never reported it. What would I say? Some guys walked through the woods at night with flashlights? It wasn't illegal, but something about them wasn't right. I've thought about it 100 times. What were they looking for? Why didn't they speak? Why were they moving slow and wide like they were sweeping for something? Why did they come uphill toward my new tent when I hadn't made a fire or left any lights? I haven't gone back to Barehead Ridge. I haven't camped alone since. I still love the woods. I still love silence and dirt trails and the sound of wind through trees. But I keep my trips short now. I bring someone with me, and I never, ever camp in the same spot for more than one night. Because I learned something up there, something simple, something cold. Not everything out in the forest is there by accident. Some things move slow on purpose. Some things breathe just outside the tent. And some things, some people you're not supposed to see. But once you do, they make sure you don't see them twice. I was 31 when it happened. It was late September 2021, and I had been working from home in Oklahoma City for almost a year straight. The stress was piling up. Meetings, deadlines, staring at screens for hours, and I felt like I was losing my mind a bit. I started craving something quiet, something real, something that didn't come from a phone or a laptop. That's when I decided to take a solo camping trip. No friends, no texts, no notifications. Just me, my gear, and a stretch of woods out near a remote part of the Ouachita National Forest. I left on a Friday morning before the sun was fully up. I packed light tent, sleeping bag, food, water, basic gear. I had my hunting knife, bear spray, and a .38 revolver my dad had passed down. Not because I expected to use it, just for peace of mind. I drove my old pickup out of the city, cutting southeast past McAllister and deeper into the hills. The weather was cool and gray. The forecast said light rain Saturday, but I figured I could handle that. I wasn't a hardcore survivalist, but I wasn't green either. I'd done plenty of solo trips in my 20s. I picked a spot near an old trailhead off a forest road that barely existed anymore. The last mile or so, I had to creep the truck over muddy ruts and past fallen branches. It was far out. No cell signal, no other cars, just woods. I parked in a clearing off the trail, threw on my pack, and started hiking in. I figured I'd hike about 2 miles in, set up camp near a creek I remembered from years ago. It felt perfect at first. The woods were quiet, just the crunch of leaves under my boots, the smell of pine and damp earth, the occasional bird. That kind of silence where you can hear your own breathing, your own heartbeat. I followed the old path, barely visible anymore, just a faint line between trees. A couple of downed logs had to be stepped over, and thorny brush was trying to reclaim the trail. But I liked that. It made the place feel untouched. By early afternoon, I reached the creek. It was just like I remembered. A slow trickle of clear water over smooth rock, surrounded by old sycamores and cottonwoods. I pitched my tent on a slightly raised spot, cleared the area of debris, and gathered a good pile of dry sticks for a fire. I had my small axe and cut a few limbs to break down. By dusk, I had a small fire going, beans warming up in a pot, and the quiet hum of nature around me. Felt like what I needed. I didn't notice anything strange until the second night. Saturday was quiet. I woke up early, stretched my legs, walked around the area. There was no one for miles. I didn't see a single footprint or hear a single motor. Around noon, it started to drizzle. I sat under the rainfly, watching water beads slide off the tent, eating trail mix and reading an old paperback. Later, the rain got heavier, but it stayed warm enough, and the fire kept going under the tarp I'd strung between trees. It was around 8 or 9 p.m. when I noticed something that felt off. I had just finished eating, and the fire was burning low. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, like more was coming. I got up to grab more wood and paused for a second, listening. It's hard to describe the moment. Nothing made a sound. No wind, no insects, no birds. Just stillness, thick and strange. I stood still, trying to hear anything. Sometimes the forest goes quiet when a predator's nearby, or when the weather shifts suddenly. I told myself it was probably just that. But then I noticed something else. A faint impression in the soft mud, about 30 feet from the tent, near the tree line. I walked closer and crouched. It was a footprint, not a boot print.
Bora.
Human, left foot, toes splayed wide. The kind of print you'd see if someone walked through mud barefoot. But it wasn't mine. I had worn boots since arriving and hadn't stepped anywhere near that side of the trees. I stared at it for a while. It was big, maybe size 11 or 12, deep enough to be fresh. The shape was weird too, like the person had walked with a strange pressure, heel barely touching, almost like they'd crept up quietly. I looked around but didn't see any others. Just that one print. I scanned the woods past the tree line, but there was nothing. No movement, no sounds, no smell. I circled the tent once, then twice, checking for other signs. I didn't find anything else, but the back of my neck itched. I felt watched. I stayed up a while longer, poking at the fire, staring into the dark. Eventually, I zipped up the tent and lay down, knife in my hand, the revolver tucked in the side pocket. I didn't sleep much. Every little sound outside made me flinch. I thought I heard footsteps once. Faint, slow crunching of leaves. But when I sat up and listened, there was nothing. The next morning, the forest was back to normal. Birds chirped. The creek ran clear. I walked around again, checking where I'd seen the footprint. It was washed out some from the rain, but still there. No new prints.
No drag marks.
Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was an old print. Maybe my own and I hadn't realized. I ate, packed up, and told myself I'd stay one more night. One more. That was a mistake. The last night I barely lit a fire. I didn't want to draw attention. I ate cold food. I stayed alert. As dusk turned to dark, the feeling came back. Not just fear, something deeper. I felt like something was around. Something that didn't want to be seen. Around 10 p.m., I heard movement. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't a raccoon. It was steady, deliberate, branches cracking. I killed the lantern, sat in the dark, barely breathing. The sound came closer, slow steps circling just beyond my tent's edge. I could hear breathing, human breathing, low and rough. I gripped the revolver, my heart slamming against my ribs. I waited, barely blinking, for what felt like an hour. Then silence again. That same heavy silence from the night before. Then I heard it directly behind the tent. A long, slow exhale. Right there. I didn't move. I didn't unzip. I just held still. For hours. I didn't sleep. At some point, I must have passed out with my back against the tent wall, hands still on the gun. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. Pale light through the mesh above. Everything looked calm. I rushed out of the tent and looked around. The ground was disturbed behind the tent. Not footprints exactly, but marks like someone had crouched there. Hands in the mud. Knees. The kind of marks you'd see if someone stayed completely still, watching for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't even pack properly. I stuffed what I could into the bag, collapsed the tent in seconds, and bolted. I hiked fast, not caring about the trail, breaking brush, slipping in mud. I didn't stop until I reached the truck. When I got to it, I found something that nearly made me vomit. There was a strip of duct tape stuck to the driver's side mirror. Just one piece, dirty like it had been handled, and on the ground near the rear tire, a zip tie. I threw my gear into the bed, locked the doors, and got out of there. I drove straight until I hit the next gas station with a signal. I called my brother and told him where I'd been, told him what happened. He didn't laugh. He just told me I should have never gone alone. I didn't report it. What could I say? That someone crouched outside my tent and left a zip tie near my truck? There was no crime, nothing I could prove. But I haven't gone camping alone since. I still camp, but always with someone else. I always double-check the area now, always carry more than I need, always back into my parking spots, and I never stay in the same place more than one night. Whatever was out there that weekend, it wasn't an animal, it was a person, and they weren't lost or confused or curious. They were waiting, and if I hadn't woken up early that morning, if I hadn't packed fast, I think they were going to take me. My name's Colin. I was 32 the year this happened. It was November of 2017. I still remember the exact date, the 12th, because it was the last morning I felt completely relaxed in the woods. I live in western Nebraska now, but this happened near Red Cloud, which is about 15 miles north of the Kansas border. I used to go hunting in that area every fall, and that year I was doing something I hadn't done before, staying out there for 2 nights by myself. I thought it would be peaceful. That year had been rough. I'd gone through a breakup, my dog had died, and my job as a diesel mechanic had become more stressful than usual. I needed time to clear my head. Hunting, to me, was always about more than just shooting something. It was being alone, working hard, staying focused, and getting away from everything else. I chose an area on the edge of a private property line, land owned by a distant cousin of mine who let me hunt there every fall. There was a small hill that dropped into a long stretch of brushy creek. Deer moved through there early in the morning and at dusk, almost like clockwork. No one else was supposed to be out there. It was remote, and once you went off the gravel road that cut past the property, it was nothing but overgrown trails, steep ditches, and thick cottonwood trees. I figured it was the perfect place to spend a couple days alone. I packed light, a small one-person tent, my .308, a cooler with food, a tiny propane stove, a lantern.
No firewood, no campfire.
I didn't want the deer to smell anything out of place, and I didn't want the hassle. I also didn't tell many people I was going. Just my brother, Eric, and my coworker, Trey. Told them I'd be back Tuesday. I didn't even mention the specific property. I wish I had. I got out there late Sunday afternoon, set up my tent right as the sun was dropping behind the bare trees. It was quiet, colder than I expected, but the air was dry and the sky was clear. The only sound was the occasional gust of wind brushing dead leaves across the ground. That first night went exactly as I wanted it to. I made a small meal on the stove, ate while crouched just outside the tent, and then got into my sleeping bag with a headlamp and read a bit. I don't think I even stayed awake an hour after dark. I slept light, though. I always do when I'm alone in the woods. Every little crack of a branch or shuffle of an animal kept my ears half alert. But it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Just deer and raccoons, maybe a coyote passing through. The usual. The next morning, I woke up just before 5, cold and stiff. My sleeping bag had bunched up around my legs, and my toes were numb. I boiled water for coffee, got dressed in layers, and walked down into the creek in the dark with my rifle and a small folding stool. I sat for hours, shivering. Around 8, I saw 2 does moving fast, like they'd been spooked, but nothing behind them. I stayed out there until noon, then made my way back up to the tent, stopping a few times to listen. Nothing, just the wind again. Around 3, I went out for the evening sit. I moved deeper down the creek this time, closer to a bend where I'd once seen a big buck cross the year before. I sat tucked into some brush, staying still. It was one of those November evenings where the wind suddenly dies and everything gets quiet and heavy. You almost feel like the whole forest is holding its breath. That's when I saw him. I thought it was another hunter at first, but no one was supposed to be out there. The figure came down the ridge on the far side of the creek, not walking slow or careful like a hunter should, just stepping through the brush with long, casual strides, almost like he didn't care if anything hurt him. He didn't carry a gun. That's what stood out to me immediately. His hands were empty, not even a bow. I stared, trying to make sense of it. He was wearing dark pants and a coat, with a hood pulled over his head, but his arms were bare. No gloves, no orange vest. Not legal. I kept still, trying not to draw attention. He moved past me about 40 yards away, walked down toward the low creek bottom, then stopped and stood completely still, just looking into the trees. I watched him for maybe 2 minutes. He didn't move, didn't look around, just stared into the trees. Then he crouched down slowly, not like someone taking a rest, more like someone trying to disappear. Then he lay on his side in the brush. I thought maybe he was sick or hurt, but I didn't dare move. After 10 more minutes, I slowly stood up, stayed low, and made my way back up the hill toward my tent, checking over my shoulder the whole way. I didn't see him follow. I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. If it was another hunter, fine, but no gun, no vest, and lying in the brush? Who does that? I kept my rifle with me even in the tent that night. I didn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I heard something move outside. I held my breath. It wasn't wind. It was slow, shuffling footsteps on dry leaves. They circled halfway around the tent and stopped. I gripped the rifle tighter, finger just outside the trigger guard. Whoever it was didn't say anything, didn't knock on the tent or make a sound, just stood out there. After maybe 2 minutes, the steps moved away. I heard nothing for the rest of the night. By sunrise, I was done. I decided I'd break camp and head out early. It wasn't worth it anymore. I packed up fast. I didn't even eat. I kept scanning the woods. As I stuffed the last gear into my pack, I thought I heard something move uphill from me, like a foot hitting a loose stone. I didn't check. I didn't want to know. I started walking back toward where I'd parked. It was a mile hike, maybe more, up a ridge and through some trees. My nerves were shot. Every sound made me tense. I stayed alert, rifle slung over one shoulder, safety off. About halfway through the hike, I saw a boot print. It was fresh, deep heel, pointed in the direction I had come from, not leading out like mine would have been. I kept going faster. I made it back to the truck. As soon as I was in, I locked the doors, sat for a second, and caught my breath. Then I looked at my driver's side mirror. There was someone standing just at the edge of the tree line about 60 yards back. Same build, same clothes, no orange, no gun, standing still, watching the truck. I started the engine and didn't look back again until I hit the paved road. I didn't tell anyone the full story at first. I just said I cut my trip short, didn't see anything worth shooting, but I started reading around online, looking into missing person reports in that area. Homeless people who might have gone into the woods. Nothing matched, nothing recent, just a vague story from a guy who said his uncle had gotten stalked by someone near the river bottoms back in the 90s. But no one ever found who it was. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when I went to wash my hunting clothes, that I noticed something weird. The back pocket of my hunting pants, the one I never use, had been unbuttoned. I always snap it closed. Inside was a small strip of fabric, folded over twice, like a piece torn from a t-shirt. It wasn't mine. It smelled like wood smoke and something else I couldn't place. Maybe old sweat or mildew. I threw it away without even opening it all the way. That was the last year I ever camped alone. Now I go out with friends or not at all. I don't care if people think I'm paranoid. I don't care if I never shoot another deer. Something was out there. Not a ghost, not a monster, just a man. And he knew exactly where I was. And he wasn't hunting deer. It was September 2014 when I decided to spend a weekend alone out in the woods near the North Carolina-Tennessee border. I was 29 years old back then, working a construction job that had started to wear me down. I had a couple days off and just needed to get away from everything. That included people, traffic, noise, and especially my phone. I didn't tell many folks I was leaving. I just packed up the essentials, filled up the truck, and drove west until the roads got smaller, narrower, then finally turned to gravel. I had gone out to that area once before with a friend years ago, and I remembered a hidden pull-off spot beside a creek that led into the forest. There was a little fire pit we had made back then and enough flat ground for a tent. It wasn't on any map, and you wouldn't find it unless you were looking hard for it. Felt like the right place to be alone. I reached the turnoff in the afternoon. It was quiet, still. The kind of stillness that settles over everything once you're far enough from any highway or town. The road sloped down slightly into a forest of tall, gray trees with low brush and patches of thick pine needles. I pulled the truck down the narrow trail and parked it in a spot where it was mostly hidden. Then I got out, stretched, and stood there listening.
No engines.
No people, just wind in the leaves and water trickling through rocks in the creek. That was what I needed. I unloaded my pack, set up the tent, and got a small fire going by evening. The sun disappeared behind the trees quick, and the air turned colder than I expected. I had layers, though, and a small folding chair. I just sat there for a while, watching the fire crackle, thinking about how nice it was to not hear a single thing besides the woods. That first night was uneventful. I heard some branches snap in the distance, probably deer or raccoons, and the occasional owl calling out. I wasn't worried. I'd been in the woods plenty of times and learned early not to jump at every sound. I kept my knife near me, and my .38 was zipped into the inside flap of my tent just in case, but I never expected to use it. I fell asleep sometime around 10 and slept straight through until morning. The next day was just as calm. I spent most of it hiking up a ridge behind camp, trying to find a good overlook. The forest stretched far in every direction, nothing but green and gray with the occasional break where you could see the mountains. I saw no one all day.
No trucks, no vehicles.
Just scattered signs of animals and the thick smell of pine sap and damp moss. I got back to camp around 5, still alone, still quiet. It wasn't until later that I noticed something odd. I had placed a small blue dry bag near the edge of the creek that morning, maybe 10 yards from camp. Inside was just an old flannel shirt and a water bottle. When I went to grab it that evening, it was gone. I looked around for it, thinking maybe I put it somewhere else or kicked it without noticing, but it was just not there. I searched all around, down by the rocks, even in the brush, but it was nowhere to be found. I brushed it off. Maybe I left it behind when I climbed the ridge. Maybe I'd find it the next day. I cooked dinner over the fire, drank some whiskey I brought in a flask, and stayed up a little later that night. But I didn't sleep as well. At some point in the night, I woke up to a strange sound. It wasn't an animal. It was too steady. I lay still, listening. It was a soft metallic creaking, like hinges or a truck bed groaning as it shifted weight. It lasted maybe 5 or 6 seconds, then stopped. I sat up, unzipped the tent halfway, and peeked out. Nothing. Just dark trees and the soft red glow of embers in the fire pit.
No lights. No footsteps.
I stayed like that for a long time, just listening. Eventually, I laid back down, but I kept my hand near the knife. Morning came slow, gray and foggy, colder than before. I got up, stretched, and noticed fresh marks in the dirt beside the truck. Not tire tracks, those were the same, but footprints. Not boots either. Worn sneakers, tread worn flat near the heel, like someone who had walked a long time in them. I followed the prints a few feet. They led toward the edge of the trees, past the creek, then just stopped, like whoever made them turn back or stepped off into the brush. I hadn't seen another vehicle in 2 days. I hadn't heard a single engine. And then I noticed something else. On the back of my truck, there was a handprint, faint, dusty, like someone had touched the tailgate with a dry palm. The kind of mark that's only visible if the light hits it just right. The fingers were long. I packed up that morning. Not everything, just enough for a few hours. I figured maybe I'd just hike around to clear my head. I left the fire cold and my tent zipped up. Took my day pack, the .38, and headed uphill on a long game trail. I didn't want to think someone had found my camp, but it was hard not to. The hike took me along the edge of a ridgeline. At one point, I looked back and saw the clearing where my truck was parked, just barely visible through the trees. The light hit something near it, something shiny. It was a truck. a different one, white, older model, parked halfway behind the tree line, almost invisible from the road. I hadn't seen it before. It definitely hadn't been there when I arrived. I crouched down and watched for a long time. 30 minutes, maybe more. No movement, no door opening, no people. But it was there. I made my way back down, slow and quiet, stayed off the main trail. I came around through a thicker section of brush and got close enough to see my own truck again. The white pickup was gone. Not a sound. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up inside my tent, gun in hand, just listening. Every little noise made my heart pound. A branch snapping, leaves moving, even the wind. Then, around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, not an animal. Human. They came up the trail, then stopped. Silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then I heard the zipper on my tent twitch. Just a tug, a test. I shot up, pointed the gun at the entrance, heart hammering so hard I felt sick. But whoever was out there had already moved away. I waited, crouched, sweating. Nothing else happened. Morning came again, and this time I wasn't staying another minute. I packed everything fast, didn't care how messy it was, shoved gear into the truck bed and slammed it shut. I got in and started driving. A mile down the gravel road, I saw a piece of cloth nailed to a tree. Looked like a shirt. My shirt, the one that was inside that blue dry bag that disappeared. Nailed up like a flag, as if someone wanted me to know they'd taken it. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. It took me 3 hours to reach the main highway. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station outside Asheville. I stayed in a motel that night, locked the door, dragged a chair in front of it, kept the gun close. Over the next week, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I walked to my truck, I checked the back seat. I started checking behind me more often, glancing in store windows to see reflections. Eventually, it faded. I told myself it was just paranoia. But then, 2 weeks later, I got home from work and found a small package on my porch. No return address.
No markings.
Inside was the blue dry bag. Still zipped. Still clean. Nothing else. No note. No damage. Just the bag. I threw it away without opening it. I haven't gone camping alone since. It was 2016 when I decided to go camping alone in Dartmore, in the southwest of England. I was 28 back then, working in Exeter as a mechanic. I didn't have many close friends around anymore, and I wasn't in a relationship. I needed to clear my head and get away for a bit. It was one of those weeks where work kept piling up and everything just started feeling heavy. I was never much of a drinker or the kind to sit around doing nothing, so getting out to nature made more sense to me. I'd camped before, usually with my cousins or old school mates when I was younger, but this was my first time going alone for more than one night. Dartmoor had always fascinated me. The open moorland, the rocky outcrops, what they call tors, and the mist that rolled in like clockwork some evenings. There was something raw about it, quiet but still intense. That's what I was looking for. Silence and space. I left on a Thursday morning in mid-September. The weather was still decent that time of year, cool but not cold, dry skies, no forecast of rain. I packed my gear the night before. Tent, stove, sleeping bag, food rations, gas canisters, water purifier, headlamp, extra socks, first aid, all the usual stuff. I even brought a small knife I usually kept in my toolbox. Not because I expected to need it, just habit. My plan was to walk a few miles from the car park at Postbridge and set up camp near one of the lesser visited tors, something off the main walking paths. I'd found an old OS map online that showed a narrow route heading northeast, curving toward a place called Birch Tor. Not many people talked about that one, which made it more appealing. It took me around 3 hours to hike there. The ground was uneven in places, and I had to cross a couple of muddy streams that slowed me down, but it wasn't too difficult. The sky stayed clear, and the late afternoon sun hit the hills just right. It felt perfect, honestly. I picked a flat patch of ground just southeast of the Tor, surrounded by tall, rustling grass and an open view of the valley below. Not a single sign of another person in any direction. I set up my tent facing west so I could watch the sunset while I ate. I heated up a tin of beans and some bread over my stove, then sat on a rock and ate slowly, letting the wind cool my face. There were a few birds circling in the distance and the occasional rustle from rabbits moving through the grass. Felt calm. I hadn't felt that calm in months. As night fell, the wind picked up a bit. Nothing bad, just the kind that whistles low across the hills. I crawled into my tent, zipped myself into the sleeping bag, and left the flap cracked open a little to watch the stars. The sky was clear as glass.
No clouds.
You could see the entire spread of stars and the faint line of the Milky Way. I dozed off sometime after midnight, I think. I woke up just after 3 a.m. I know because I checked my watch. Something had stirred me, but I couldn't place it at first. Maybe it was a sound or maybe just a shift in the wind. I sat up slowly, trying not to make much noise. I kept the headlamp off. There was no obvious sound outside. No animals moving through the grass. No wind hitting the tent hard. Just silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that settles you. It was the kind that presses down, like everything's holding its breath. Then I noticed something odd. Through the crack in the tent flap, just at the edge of my view to the left, I saw movement. It was subtle, slow, but not like a fox or badger. It was tall, upright, human-shaped. I sat still, staring through that small opening, not even blinking. After maybe 15 seconds, I saw her. A woman. She was walking slowly across the slope, maybe 40 feet away from my tent, moving diagonally toward the Tor, not directly toward me. Her shape was clear against the sky. She wasn't carrying a light. She had something long draped over her shoulders, a coat maybe, or a cloak. It moved gently behind her in the wind. Her hair looked long, almost shoulder length, and from the silhouette it looked tangled or messy. I couldn't see her face, but the shape of her body was definitely female. She didn't act like someone hiking or out camping. No backpack, no flashlight, no signs of gear. Just walking, slowly, quietly. It was well past 3 a.m. I stayed completely still. My heart was thumping hard, but I kept telling myself she might just be another camper. Maybe someone who got lost or who just liked walking at night. But even saying that in my head didn't feel right. Who walks alone in complete silence in the middle of Dartmore at 3 in the morning without a light or gear? She didn't stop. She didn't even glance toward my tent. She just kept walking up the slope toward the Tor until she faded into the dark. I didn't move for at least another half hour. I stayed sitting up, holding the knife I kept near my sleeping bag, breathing slow. Eventually I laid back down, but I didn't fall asleep again until dawn started creeping in. The next morning, I came out of the tent feeling stiff. I checked around the area just to reassure myself. Nothing strange. No tracks I could make out. Grass all looked undisturbed. Maybe I imagined her. Maybe it was just a hiker or even a dream I confused for real. I wanted to believe that, but something made me uneasy enough to pack up early. I didn't want to camp there another night. Instead, I hiked toward another Tor a few miles away, Hockney Tor, and camped there. It wasn't as isolated, and I even saw a couple of distant walkers across the valley, which helped settle me. The second night passed without anything weird. I managed to sleep all right, but things didn't end there. Back home in Exeter, about a week later, I couldn't stop thinking about that woman. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Just something about it made me feel like I shouldn't. But I did some online searching about Birch Tor and the surrounding area. Not ghost stories or myths. I didn't believe in that crap. I was looking for actual reports, missing persons, criminal activity, anything. I found a forum post dated from 2004 by a man named Reese who mentioned a strange woman he saw walking near the same tour. His story was nearly identical to mine. Same time of night, same quiet movement, same strange clothing. He never saw her face either. He had camped with a friend who never woke up during the sighting, and he said he left Dartmore early the next morning feeling unsettled. The thread didn't get many replies. People assumed he was just tired or exaggerating. Then I found another entry, buried deeper in an old backpacking blog from 1998. A woman who hiked alone had seen what she described as a lone figure of a female walking without gear near Birch Tor in the early hours. She thought it was a poacher at first, but the woman never returned when she called out. The blogger didn't seem scared, just puzzled, and chalked it up to coincidence. That made 3 of us. 3 people who all saw the same kind of woman in the same spot over nearly 20 years apart. I don't know what that means. I don't think it means anything supernatural. Maybe it's someone who lives off-grid, or someone mentally unwell who wanders the moors at night. Maybe it's more than one person, and it's just a strange coincidence. But what stuck with me, what still sticks with me, is the way she moved. That calm, steady pace, like she knew exactly where she was going, like she'd walked that hill 1,000 times. I haven't gone camping alone since then. I still go with friends sometimes, usually to places I know well, where the trees are close and the lights of a town aren't far away. I never went back to Dartmore. Sometimes when I lie awake late at night, I picture her shape moving up that slope. The way she never looked at me, the way the grass barely shifted as she walked, the long piece of clothing trailing behind her in the wind. If she was real, I have no idea what she was doing out there. If she wasn't real, then I don't know what that says about me. But I know what I saw, and I know I'll never camp near Birch Tor again.